Let's turn our attention to the college game where Arch Manning and Texas are still in the top 10. But here's a look at the Heisman odds, which have matched Texas's preseason ranking. Again, remember, they were #1 in the polls for the first time in program history. Plus 750 for Arch to come away with the award. Tough game at the Shoe against Ohio State, but you see their home games against San Jose State and then in UTEP as well. Now 35-1 for the once heralded quarterback. Let's bring in Richard Johnson, our insider, to talk about the much talked about quarterback. Richard, it just seems like everybody has an opinion on Arch right now, specifically what's wrong with him. But when you look at what we've seen so far in the small sample size with Sark in this offense, what stands out to you? What are some of the glaring things that we're seeing on the field?
Yeah, I think some of it is just a symptom of pressing. Some of it's trying to do too much. I think when you've got offenses that you know have good players, that they don't look very functional, or they look like they're messing up on at some time, you get into it and you start to say, oh, well, it's not always all the quarterback. It's usually one thing and then it's another. It's not always on the quarterback. Like, for instance, Arch had an incompletion on Saturday where two wide receivers collided because the spacing on the route concept was not the way it needed to be. The interception, yeah, you'd rather not have thrown an interception, but it was on a 4th down when I think everybody would say in the red zone, the ball's got to get in the end zone. And he did. He threw it up into the end zone to try to make a play, and it just didn't work. So you look between the lines, and there are some things contextually about his performance that you can put in the proper context, and you can say, okay, it's still there. I thought he had a great throw. For instance, there was a blitz that he had at one point in time. UTEP was bringing a blitz off the edge. He's got a play fake. His back is to the blitz. He turns around, sees the blitz coming in his face, and flips the ball out and gets it out quickly. There was one throw over the middle he had that he almost decapitated the umpire. I felt bad for the ref because Arch is zinging it in there like that. There are things on there. The kid is not lost. The kid is not a lost cause. I'm not selling all of my stock at this point in time. I do still think it's in there, but he's got to stop pressing. He's got to let the game come to him. And this Texas offense needs to chill, and it's got to find what they do best. I think over the next couple weeks, especially during their bye week, they'll be able to kind of reset, quiet the noise, and figure some things out. But yeah, right now it looks pretty ugly at some times on offense for Arch in Texas.
Let me quickly follow, because you brought up something here in terms of like the time that they have. And I remember clearly after the loss to Ohio State, Steve Sarkisian was like, we're going to have time in the non-con to get ready for league play. But now we're starting to get into the thing where they have Sam Houston, then they start SEC play. Is there anything Sark can do to help get Arch Manning and this offense going?
Yeah, I think personally running him a bit more. Now that's a tough thing to kind of weigh because obviously you want to keep him healthy. And Sark said that after the Ohio State game. He said, I should have run him a little bit more in this game to kind of get his juices flowing early. The guy is mobile. The guy can move. So putting the ball in his hands on the ground and running him a little bit more, giving an added dimension to Texas's offense, because now they've got some running back injuries that are of a concern as well, could potentially help them out a little bit moving forward.
So they've got that game against Florida eventually. Speaking of the Gators with Billy Napier, the popular thought, at least right now, is that the head coach is living on borrowed time. What have you heard, and what do you think is going to happen?
Well, obviously, I've heard that a whole lot of people are not happy in Gainesville. You're starting to hear the chatter about candidates about a potential new coach. There's a lot of discontent right now about how DJ Lagway's playing specifically, and that falls on Billy Napier because Billy Napier is the play caller and somebody who has his hand in the offense quite a bit, especially the quarterback room as that offensive play caller. So, if they go to Miami and they get, just absolutely blown out, like I'm talking about, you lose by like 30 points, maybe you're at a point where, okay, we don't really have a choice. The toxicity in the fan base is just too great. But anything short of that, this Florida defense, although it is banged up front, this Florida defense is playing really well this season. They've only allowed 2 touchdowns in 3 games. The defense is not the reason they lost that game against LSU. Again, there's a pick 6 in that game that DJ Lagway threw. Florida's defense, I should say, only allowed 13 points in that game, truly. So I think if you're Florida, you try to say, can the defense continue to hold up its end of the bargain? We get the offense figured out, because obviously the prevailing theme around Florida's offense is that DJ Lagway just has not had a ton of time, a lot of reps in the offseason, did not throw during spring. during spring practice and was a little bit banged up coming into fall camp, as was his wide receiver core. So it's an offense that just looks out of sync in a lot of different ways. Can the defense hold up its end of the bargain on Saturday night against Miami? And maybe the offense can find something with success. Jaden Ball's a great running back. Do you involve him more in the equation as a running back? I don't know, but Florida's going to have to try to find it on offense to kind of arrest the slide here going into a bye week.
No doubt. Let's get to, well, we have a handful of ranked unranked games, which is fun to see in any slate, but we do have Auburn and Oklahoma, and really changes at quarterbacks for both teams, and so far so good on both sides. We spent a lot of time talking about John Mateer. How about we flip things and talk about Jackson Arnold? What excites you most about his return and his play so far for the Tigers?
Yeah, when you put the ball in his hand, Jackson Arnold's a special player. Jackson Arnold did some things in that opener against Oklahoma that you sit and you say, whoa, this guy can really, really move. I think Auburn's offense is going to be very interesting when you consider that. They've got some running backs that are a little bit banged up, so we'll see what happens. But my thing with Jackson Arnold playing this Oklahoma team is I just saw what Oklahoma did to a quarterback in Bryce Underwood, who's got all the dual threat talent in the world, but he came up against Brent Venables, and Venables really had something for him on the defensive side of the ball with all the calls and all the blitzes and all the exotic things that OU was able to do. Oklahoma showed that they've still got that gear with Venables as the defensive play caller. You would expect Jackson Arnold to have a lot more enthusiasm for this game and a little bit of added motivation because he's playing OU, and we saw how that ended last year. It was just a really sour note for all involved. So I think it's a really intriguing matchup. My chips are always in on Brent Venables as a defensive coordinator with what that OU defense can do. I think they'll find some ways to really stop Auburn on offense.
Jackson Arnold already went against Dave Aranda in Waco, got through that test as another one with Brent Venables. It's certainly not going to get any easier for the Auburn Tiger quarterback here. They are about just under a touchdown dog on the road in Norman, Oklahoma. You brought up Bryce Underwood, so let's talk about the Wolverines. Big Ten on CBS this week at Nebraska here. And before we get to the quarterback matchup, we continue to follow, of course, no Sherrone Moore there for the Wolverines, already navigating one game with Biff Poggi in the interim role. But there were some comments from legendary head coach Nick Saban about the situation happening in Ann Arbor. And I'm paraphrasing part of the quote here, and it said the real challenge comes next week when Coach Moore can't be at practice. That's going to be the toughest adjustment. When I had COVID and I had to sit out, at least I could stay home, watch practice on Zoom, talk to the team afterwards, so I still felt engaged. But if he can't go to practice at all, he's going to feel totally out of sync. What do you make of those comments?
Well, I actually think Michigan's got a plan for this. Michigan's dealt with this over the last few years with the different suspensions to Jim Harbaugh. I mean, it was a couple years ago when Michigan had a different interim coach in every one of their early games because Jim Harbaugh was serving a suspension. So Michigan's dealt with this before, I think, have the Wolverines. I think they're able to operationally get around this speed bump and move forward. Obviously, they've known that this was the plan for quite some time. You're able to plan for it. Biff Poggi obviously has great head coaching experience. And he said after the game last week against Central Michigan, I believe, he said that his Labrador Retriever could coach Bryce Underwood. So, we know what Bryce Underwood can do. He's an absolutely immense talent. I'm interested to see how he goes in this game. But yeah, I think Michigan is uniquely equipped to actually deal with this Sherrone Moore stepping back and not being around the program.
And then when it comes to the quarterback matchup with Bryce Underwood, Dylan Raiola, which quarterback, in your opinion, will have to be the best version of himself on Saturday?
Definitely Raiola, just because I think with Michigan, everything with Bryce Underwood this season is found money. You're trying to see what he can do and what he can't do, his limitations, what he does well, what he does poorly. I think he's a freshman right now. He's going to have to take his lumps. He will take his lumps. He did against Oklahoma, for instance. How does he learn? How does he respond from adversity? Those things. With Dylan Raiola, this is the situation where with an offensive line in front of him that you think at Nebraska is finally shored up for the first time in a while, can Raiola take the next step? I thought he did some really nice things in their opener against Cincinnati, but also put the ball in harm's way. Had one ball that, frankly, should have been a pick six that got dropped by the Cincinnati defender. So there are some good things on the tape from Raiola in that game, but obviously some not so good as well. I think for me, Raiola's got to take the next step in this game for his progression as a complete quarterback. And I think it's more on him than it is Bryce Underwood.
If it's Raiola and his teammates, if they so choose, they can play the chip of being underdogs, which they will be by about 2.5 points against the Wolverines again Saturday afternoon. Richard, certainly appreciated. Speaking of the big game, Big Ten on CBS. We're going on the road with our college football pregame show. Emily Proud, Brian McFadden, Damian Harris, Danny Cadell, Mackenzie Brooks. Live from the rail yard in Lincoln, Nebraska. Come join the show Saturday starting at 9 a.m. Eastern.